the culture engine.
Sam, hello and welcome to Culture Engine. I'm so excited to have you here today. Let's start with a little warm up for our listeners. Let's give them an idea why they should listen to Sam Valentine in your advices about culture. Tell us about your experience.
It's a good question, and thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here as well. Um, it's a big question. I don't know why people should listen. My experience, I think I've taken in 20 years of work experience now. I've worked in many countries, 7 or 8 different countries, sort of in various leadership positions, management positions, comms, engagement, employee experience, and analytics. So hopefully I've got a little bit of experience and insight to share. I wouldn't say that people need to listen, but hopefully it's useful to hear an opinion and hear perspectives, and hopefully I've got something to offer, kind of based on all that history and experience.
What are those jobs you currently cover on your in Miro?
In Miro, so I'm head of employee experience insights at Miro,
Mhm.
and for a little period of time I was head of sustainable performance. But basically, my role is to understand and positively influence how people feel about work. So taking insights, listening really deeply to people. I think, yeah, trying to listen with compassion to understand what's happening, and then to partner with the right people to build the solutions to their pain points. And that's hopefully what enables a high performance culture and enables people to sustain great performance and be at their best. So that's the aim of the job. It's not without its challenges, but that's what keeps it fun.
That's it. That's sounds really cool, and I love that parts about analytics and compassionate listening. We will go back to it a little bit later, but first, I would love to start with your non-traditional HR background. As far as I know, you started your journey from education, then you moved to public sector, then private tech. Could you please tell us how, from your experience, the culture and the way the organizations work internally changes in different industries where you have been already?
Yeah, so my path into HR came from, yeah, a very different route. I think the background that I have, I started off teaching English. I worked for British Council for a long period of time. So that's a company, UK company that promotes cultural relations and sort of, yeah, has a very cross-cultural viewpoint. So yeah, through that's when I started getting really interested in leadership, and through like thinking about leadership. So yeah, thought more about communications and how communications and leadership are sort of synonymous with each other. And then that led to engagement and how we think about engagement, which then sort of led to that broader area of experience. So I think like different companies probably are at different parts of that scale. And I think that like, it's maybe not company by company, but definitely the change over time has gone from that sort of quite top-down leadership. We need to tell people what to think, we need to direct, to that much more participatory. We need to involve people, we need to engage people, through a sort of period of we need to listen and build solutions based on what people are saying, to we need to like test our hypotheses and work with people to iterate and build. So that's the difference that I've seen, is whether we're engaging people to make them do something, whether we're engaging people to understand what they want to do, or whether, which is where I think we are now, engaging people because we want to build and develop something together. But that sort of starts in identity. So I think they're the sort of like three broad approaches that I've seen.
So, to sum up, from your experience, what is the employee engagement?
I think employee engagement is just a shared passion or a directed passion.
Mm.
It's the sense that, yeah, you want to give your energy to the purpose or to the direction that you're being asked to go in. I think like traditional definitions around discretionary effort. I don't like that, because I think too much discretionary effort leads to burnout. But I think directing your passion towards something that you can see fulfillment coming from, that's engagement. And disengagement is when that passion is misdirected, or when that passion does not lead to fulfillment. So I think, yeah, we have to sort of balance these concepts quite a lot of the time.
As from your definition, it feels to me that passion is something that comes deeply from within. So basically, as if my logic is right, you cannot boost this passion externally. You should just nurture what the person has internally. So, did I get you right that basically we cannot boost employee engagement?
I think we can help people discover the passion. I think we can help people maximize passion. I think everyone comes with sort of a baseline of passion and alignment, but through coaching, through support, through good leadership, good communications, you can you can bring that passion out. You can find those things. 15 years ago, very few people were passionate about AI. Like a tiny number, perhaps. And they now many people like passionately for or passionately against. So we can discover along the way. I think you can build that and you can direct it. And that's what boosts engagement. So I think yeah, you can boost engagement, you can definitely break engagement. You can definitely like inhibit engagement. And it's more sort of removing those like inhibitors and barriers that allows passion, fulfillment, satisfaction to come through.
The culture engine.
Sam, tell us a little bit about how engagement is connected with culture in your experience. How do you see, is the engagement something that belongs to culture, or culture that's something that belongs to engagement?
It's more of an equal footing. It's more of a marriage than a sort of ownership. I think culture and engagement go hand in hand. Well, one of the things that we at Miro sort of really look at and really take seriously is this idea of culture being a product. So culture is not something that is, culture is something that does. So we have to influence our culture, we have to tend to it, we have to direct it in the right way. And that takes engagement to do that. But that culture also influences the engagement. So if you want a culture of innovation, you need to really design the sort of innovation touch points and processes. And people who are motivated by innovation will find their way through that. So I think yeah, engagement drives culture, but culture drives engagement. But you have to be very intentional about the culture that you want to drive the sort of engagement that you want as well. And it's that sort of yeah positive engagement with a culture that is going to keep the iteration going.
So basically, I should have like the very clear understanding of what culture am I building. Only afterwards, I will be able to design exactly what I need. Am I getting you right?
Yeah, exactly. So I've whenever I talk at conferences or on podcasts, and I talk a lot about this in customer meetings, and I talk a lot to my colleagues at length. Like for 20 years, I think, when I was sort of yeah coming through and sort of yeah taking my first steps, I'd always go into workshops or training sessions, and there'd always be the question, what is your culture? Yeah, how would you describe your culture? And everyone always says my culture is collaborative or innovative. Because of course. And I think that's kind of helpful, but I think if you start with the question, what does your culture do? It's a subtle shift, but my culture drives innovation, or our culture makes it easy to collaborate. Then you get to the next question of, well, does it? What's accelerating that? What's putting the brakes onto that? And then yeah, then you can start to design the solutions. But I think that switch from what your culture is to what your culture does, for me, sort of reframes that whole discussion. And I think that makes culture something that's very intentional and tangible, and you can really sort of direct towards as well.
And also makes culture to me feels like it's something alive and ongoing, not the something
Yeah,
that is like very concrete and it should be like something that we cannot change. But if you are treating the culture as something that is alive and changing and making its own evolution, I believe it's also the way for people internally to be the part of this evolution. So basically, what my thought here is that like you cannot consider culture as something that will be the same every other day. It will be changing as soon as your organization is changing and as soon as the person is changing.
yeah, yeah. So something else I say a lot, like a bit tongue in cheek, but culture doesn't exist. Like no organization has a culture all the time that's the same. You have the markers of the culture, you have all the sort of like the rituals and the processes, but that culture is going to look different day to day. And like any organization, so if you're an organization of 2,000 people, you're going to have 2,000 microcultures, which kind of add up to one thing. But yeah, exactly what you're saying. It's kind of amorphous. It's not one fixed thing all the time. It changes. And you see how layoffs impacts a culture, or a massive customer success impacts a culture, or external social events impact culture. These all change. And so I think you do have to tend to it regularly and focus on it regularly and be very conscious of it, because I think that belief that we just have a culture is a dangerous one, because it sort of means you might take your eye off the ball a little bit, or just maybe assume that because we've got this policy, we've got a culture of safety. And I don't think that's necessarily the case.
Many companies choose the way to analyze their culture one more time, like in a year or in 5 years, etc., and keep it just like that, like sum up some values, name those values, and let's be honest, those values are in most cases they are pretty the same. Like everybody is about integrity, collaboration, trust, etc. What
Yeah.
is your approach to that? How would you come up to the company that is currently defining the culture and trying to find out what is their culture about?
I think values are really important. Like you need the values. They're the sort of anchor point. But I think they're an anchor point. They're sort of deep in the ground. Like these are the values, and yeah, it's always going to be some variant of trust, respect, integrity, collaboration, innovation, like that, and that's fine. The next step is like what those values mean in practice. So at Miro, we have our Miro behaviors, which are the expression of the values in practice. So how do the values show up in the behaviors that people show every day? And that's where I think we come back to them constantly. Like it's a constant process. So our recognition processes are tied to behaviors. Performance management is tied to behaviors. When we do surveys, it's tied to behaviors. So I think, yeah, that's the kind of next layer. And then we have like the listening processes and how we listen to people. And there's definitely a time and place for the annual engagement survey. Like I love an annual engagement survey. I don't think it's the most effective tool that there is, but yeah, it's good for diagnosing the deep systemic problems and deciding where the resources need to go, like the time resources or the financial resources. But the more you can listen to the subgroups, so if you can just sort of listen directly to how women in engineering are feeling about gender pay gaps, or if you can listen to how sales team are feeling about a new marketing approach, like you can get very detailed insights from them. So I think you need the foundations, you need the expression of them, and then you need the granularity on top of that to know exactly who you're listening to and for what reason and what you're going to do with it as a result. And all those things need to be sort of tied together.
How do you, in Miro and overall, can follow the exact behaviors to see how they perform inside organization? How do you keep the track of them?
So largely through trust, we have to trust that people are doing it. Leadership accountability, leadership role modeling is always going to be the number one. Like if you track how leaders um, are doing that and how people are feeding back on how leaders, managers are role modeling it, that gives you a very good indication. We look at recognition as something, and how many sort of recognitions are tied to behaviors. We sort of look at interview processes and hiring decisions and promotion decisions, and also that a bit more passively. So a piece of work I did last year was looking at all of our performance review data. So we took the anonymized performance review data of a lot of employees, all completely anonymized. So any names, references were removed with AI, so we just left with it, and then we could like in sort of interrogate that for language related behaviors. So see, is it sort of coming up in natural conversation as well? So that sort of qual data analysis gives that insight. And then it's anecdotal and through engagement with ERGs. and management groups and sort of employee cohorts. And again, it's the way that we sort of ask about how behaviors are showing up. But like these are all measures, these all give an indication. I think the observation of it is always going to be the best way of looking at it and just seeing like when decisions are being made in leadership rooms, are they being made with reference to behaviors? And are we seeing those sort of like behaviors icons show up in those decision-making templates? I think that they give very strong indications.
You said decision-making template. So basically, you suggest to people how they should follow the behaviors and what should be the decision-making around that. Is it something set up in a kind of policy guideline? How does it work actually?
So it's not in a policy or a guideline. I think yeah, as a company, we're probably not very policy heavy. I think we're sort of process driven. We're sort of yeah, a lot of trust. So there's not a firm policy, but it's through enablement and it's through training and it's through constant exposure to behaviors and the accountability around it. So I think accountability is always going to be policy. Like people who feel strong ownership of behaviors, feel a strong affinity for them, that's always going to be more successful than a policy that says you must use them. So it's having those sort of trained, again, passionate people being able to apply behaviors because they believe in them and because they see the relevance to the work. And again, like the behaviors that we have internally are also how we develop our products and is essentially what we sell to our customers as well. So that innovation, collaboration. Again, I know they're sort of generic, but that's what we sell as a company. So it does kind of wash through the whole culture.
The culture engine.
Okay, so many of our listeners will be the one who are seeking for some great advice on how to make those behaviors happen in their organization. Imagine I am an HR who is just entering the whole field of culture design, etc. What should be the exact steps I have to follow to define the behaviors and basically bring them to life inside my organization?
Um, it's a process to define the behaviors. I think start with the values, and it's starting with the question: are the values still right? Do the values still resonate? Are they still right? Probably values are values. Again, there's sort of some genericness in there. The approach we took at Miro, and it's something I've done in similar companies as well, is a long period of co-creation and iteration and development. I think at Miro we went through like 50 or 60 iterations. So it would be
Oh
build
my God, how long
test,
did it take?
a few months,
Few
a,
months.
a
Okay.
few months, yeah. But it's build, iterate, test, build, yeah, iterate, yeah, that continual cycle. And the more people that can be involved and can feed back, the better. And like when I'm saying that sort of build and iteration, it's not the wordsmithing, it's the can you see this being applied? And so like if you've got the design principles as well, like the principle that I always take is the principle of edginess. So values and behaviors should be edgy, like in on the edge of reality and aspiration. You can't go too
Oh,
aspirational because you lose reality,
yeah.
but you can't stay too wedded in exactly what's now because what's the purpose then of changing them? So you've just got to sort of, yeah, hover on that, pushing towards aspirational visionary. And so that's where I think a lot of that testing comes in. And does it speak to your engineers as much as it speaks to your salespeople? Does it speak to the people in France in the same way it speaks to the people in Japan? So that kind of testing and interpretation, I think that will naturally lead to like revision after revision until you get to that sort of final state. And it'll
I
never
love
be
that. I love that word you said, edgy. So basically, you are trying to make the everyday routine task a little bit more like legendary for people. So
yeah,
basically, they won't feel that so sad about their work. They will always have this next step that more like that meaning, which is much more complicated than everyday job they do and much more meaningful, if I can say so.
yeah, yeah. I like the word legendary, but yeah, it's exactly that. Like, yeah, there's got to be some aspiration there. There's got to be. I think yeah, I've definitely made that mistake in my career of going in with a new values framework that I'd spent a lot of money, a lot of time on, put a lot of effort into, polished it to perfection, I got it to a state where I absolutely brilliant. You take it to a leadership team and they go, this isn't us. Like this is too far out. It's like I think, yeah, that approach is very tempting to slip into that. But having the bad version, then the better version, and a better version, a better version, sort of, yeah, protects against that jolt out of reality. So yeah, that was the lesson learned. But I think, yeah, exactly that sort of legendariness, giving people something to believe in, but not compromising the identity they have at the moment. That's the line to walk.
Can you bring us some examples so we can better understand what do you mean exactly in the AG examples?
Yeah, I'm sort of looking around for our behaviours at the moment. I think, yeah, one it's more sort of like in the behaviours and how we describe them. So every company will want to say something like, "We give everyone full autonomy." And I think in many companies, like that's a nice aspirational statement, but it's not necessarily a realistic statement. Or safety is our first concern is a good value. But if you're in a very sort of high risk company, very innovation company, that doesn't work. So you've got to sort of, yeah, find the middle ground there that sorry, are we able to edit this out? I feel like I've just completely lost the thread of
No, that
what I
was
was
the
saying.
exactly about the examples. So for our listeners who are just starting, they will be trying to figure out how should this exactly not too aspirational, not too far from my identity behavior look like.
Yeah. So yeah. So yes, I think yeah, innovation is a good example. So like many companies will sort of come to Miro or come to consultants and like talk about innovation and want a value or a behavior that is we innovate, we do this. For a lot of those companies, like if they're highly regulated or like they have a product that doesn't need that innovation as much, like that is a big jump to get there. And so I've sort of asked this question quite a lot. Do you need that innovation? Or is it a step towards that? That we assume positive intent, we collaborate, we sharpen. So like if you try and go from one extreme, like we're heavily regulated, to another extreme, we're going to innovate everything. Those sort of ideas tend to clash a little bit. So you need to sort of step towards it a little bit. Otherwise, it's the dissonance around it. But that's also, I think, why so many values end up so generic.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite safe to say, oh, we collaborate. But to say we embrace conflict, that's a very different statement. And that again, like I think you have to sort of move towards that state a little bit.
Okay, let's go back to our way of the person who is just setting up the values. As soon as I am done with matching the behaviors and the values, what should be the next step? Should be the guideline, the internal communication for the whole company, or maybe values put on the walls, as many companies love to do that in their offices.
I think the values on the wall, it's got a place. It's got like, values on the wall has its place. I think the first step, I'm not naturally comfortable with the sort of top-down approach, but I
Okay.
think you need the leadership buy-in. You need to understand how this shows up in leadership conversations and leadership decisions. And without that as a basis, it's going to be very difficult. And the values on the wall, that's again, it's the dissonance. If you see it but you don't feel it, that's where the dissonance happens. So you have to lock in the leadership team around it. And there's going to be difficult decisions around it. There should never be consensus. I don't think you should ever aim for everyone, 100% of people are 100% happy. You
Yeah, that's
need
so great.
some conflict around it. You need people who are going to push at the edges, but you need a sort of contract up front of disagree and commit. You may not think this is 100% perfect, but you've got to commit to it. And if you're not willing to commit to it, then there is a difficult decision of how much cultural damage is that going to do. So if you have a value of collaboration, but a leader who is firmly opposed to collaboration and wants people to work in silos, then you've got to sort of make that decision. Like that is your first decision point of how seriously do you take these values. Once that's in, I think then it's through the champions networks, it's through it's more than communications, it's engagement, but I think that engagement comes through like where the behaviors or values get embedded into the systems that make a difference to people's experience. Like performance management is a really obvious one, recognition, again, like promotion decisions. If it's levered in through that, that kind of does the job of communication. And then the communication is just the support, it's just the sort of, yeah, what bubbles it through. Again, I've definitely seen in my career, we've got new values. These are the values. Go and look at them. Like, great. It's day one. Everyone goes and looks at them, but then they quickly get forgotten. But if it's we're revamping our performance and we're going to make your compensation decisions based on what you're doing as well as how you're doing it. Here's the criteria. Here's how it shows up. Then, then I think there's a much better chance of life.
Yeah, feels good. And I would really love to highlight this thought. You should never aim for 100 alignment. I believe that's the direct way to burn out when we are like pushing ourselves to get everybody agreed on those values, behaviors, just simple communication to the Slack chat. And have been so many times in the situations when I was the internal communications manager and I was trying to make one communication fit everyone, and it's impossible. You end up the date without like anything published and you cannot get any agreement, and basically you as a person don't feel like you have done your job right. So I believe that's the thought I would
Yeah.
really love to highlight to our people.
Yeah, yeah, and I think the one of the principles, so if you have values, whatever it is, like change, transformation, something that's always stuck with me, and I see this time and time again. Like the way that you manage change is the change that you will get as a result. It
Mm.
doesn't matter what project. If you manage change through absolute chaos, the result will be absolute chaos. If you manage a values change project by trying to achieve 100% consensus, the result will be a culture where everyone thinks they have to have 100% consensus. If your values are collaboration and innovation, and you get the different insights from different people and you encourage conflict and you disagree and commit and say it's okay not to agree and you iterate and build, you're going to have a culture that does exactly the same. And I see that time and time again, that trying to achieve perfection and consensus drives totally the opposite to what the values are saying or wanting to say.
Okay, Sam, at Esteeme, we are all about recognition, and I remember you speaking about three different kinds of recognition: recognition, celebration, appreciation. Could you tell us a little bit more about that? What is the difference between that three? And I remember that recognizing support is one of the essential. That's my nose. I just want that to bring up to life. Could you please tell us more about that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so again, this is something I talk about a lot. Again, as an expression of behaviors. Yeah, recognition. I think we all know that recognition is incredibly important, and there's big R recognition. There's financial reward and promotions, and there's small R recognition of just thank you, job well done. And I think, yeah, what I see is most in the sort of world of recognition is celebration. Like you celebrate when people do well or hit their targets or deliver a project or step in at the last minute or work over the weekend. Yeah. And there's a sort of ethical question about what we're incentivizing with that. But I think that sort of, yeah, celebration is hugely important. I think there's recognition in terms of appreciation for who people are. So celebration is what people do. Like appreciation is who people are. So yeah, when you celebrate milestones, births, life events, diverse opinions, like through EIGs, like that sort of recognition of who people are and what they bring, that's a very sort of deep layer of recognition. And the one I think that gets overlooked the most is that sort of recognition of what people need. So there's what they do, who they are, and what they need. And that sort of recognition as noticing, like you might need a bit of support, you might need a bit of extra flexibility, you might need to develop a skill. And I think though those three things, like it's celebration, appreciation, and that sort of noticing or support level recognition, that's when you have a very holistic thing. And that's where the behaviors, values really show up as well. You did this really well. That's an achievement. You exemplify this, that's you, and you need a bit of support with this. That's going to help you be better, feel happier. Like those, like as a round, I think that is what recognition sort of means.
I believe that like the sport as for now is something very energy consuming because to support someone as it feels to me, it means that I should have an energy to bring this support to table. Basically, it's like sharing my personal energy. Do you feel it the same way? Do you always find the resources to provide the support?
I think it's hard. I think it is hard. Again, when when I started my career, if I go back 15, 20 years, even 10 years, development conversations came with a lot of baggage. I think if I had a manager when I was 25 years old who came to me to say, you need some coaching, you need some development, that feels like a threat.
Mm-hmm.
That feels like, yeah, that's very energy depleting. And from a manager point of view, that was also a sort of, yeah, a scary conversation, was energy depleting. Like again at Miro, we sort of have our coach, communicate, and drive framework for managers. So all managers should be great communicators. All managers should be driving their team and like helping steer, but all managers should be great coaches as well. And one of the sort of fundamental sort of parts within that is we believe that coaching is energy giving for both sides. If you as a manager are helping people develop and thrive, that's energy giving to you as a manager. And that's kind of a core part of the role. So it's not a big scary threat, and it's not a like a difficult management conversation. You don't need to go, I need HR support because I'm having a difficult conversation. It's, yeah, someone needs development. We're recognizing that. We're going to work on it together. That's great. And again, that comes back to engagement, directing the passion, like purpose. And it's sort of easy to say that, but I think, yeah, if it's sort of framed in those terms, it becomes more energy giving than energy sapping.
The culture engine.
How to identify the conversation when we need HR as the third party in the side the room and when we don't need it?
I mean, ideally, HR is never needed. I
Oh,
would maybe like if so. I think yeah, if HR is doing its job, as we as people team are doing our jobs right, we are supporting, training, enabling, and empowering managers and leaders to be confident with those conversations. There's always going to be employee relations and conflict where you probably need that mediation or support. But I think the sort of indirect how we boost manager capability and confidence and sort of give them the guidelines and parameters. I think, yeah, that sort of smaller HR is going to lead to better results because managers who are having really productive coaching conversations. But again, that comes down to a company culture where it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to not display behaviors. It's okay to get things wrong. Like we all don't collaborate sometimes, and there's all times when we don't innovate. We stick to what we know, and there's all times we're probably not massively respectful of other people. Like that's just part of being human. I think, yeah, like again, the sort of empathy to be aware of that and say, well, yeah, I'll get better for next time, or I will be more respectful next time, or I will try and innovate next time. That's the role of the manager is to help sort of uncover that. I think if HR gets involved, it becomes more of a serious conversation, or like the outcomes feel more negative rather than a supportive conversation. So I think that the role of HR is to again keep the in an ideal world, maybe it's a bit utopian, to sort of keep the positivity and keep the focus and make sure that managers have that guidance, support, and enablement to do the right thing. And that is a big job for HR. I do appreciate that.
here comes the hard question. Is the HR the one to be responsible for building the organizational culture?
Oh, that's an easy question. No, no,
Okay,
no.
but it's in some frameworks, the culture really lies within the functions inside HR. So you don't think that's right?
Culture. I come back to that. Culture doesn't exist. Like no, nobody
Mm,
can own it. Nobody can switch it on or switch it off. Like HR can do the things that exemplify the culture. So HR can sort of build the performance management enablement that helps achieve some of the levers to achieve what culture wants to, what you want your culture to do. But culture is like it's a, well, I always say this in like presentations, customers like culture accountability is a team sport. Everyone is equally involved. Leaders have that extra pressure on their shoulders that they're sort of the role models that people look to. HR can advise and guide and support, but I think building and creating that sort of sits with everyone. I think what we can do from an HR perspective is be the strategic partner to guide and advise and help and be there as a sounding board. But if you take any company and just take HR out completely, there's still going to be culture or cultures. You're still going to have conflicts and collaboration or yeah, those sorts of things. It's going to be there anyway. So I think to put the responsibility on what one team doesn't work necessarily. And then yeah, there's a lot of other factors that go into that. But yeah,
should there be any KPIs attached to the culture thing inside the organization?
yes.
Mm,
Yes, but I think that those I don't think culture is its own KPI. I think it's within the organizational KPIs, OKRs.
hmm
So the way I sort of look at it, if for example an OKR, a KPI or an OKR is sell more of the product or double our sales in X market, which I know is not a very good KPI, but just like as a broad example. I think then the next layer down from that is look at the teams that are responsible for that. So the sales team, the leadership team, the product development team, and looking at the cultures within them. Like what are the threats to that KPI? So if people burn out because we've got a work hard, play hard culture, and 50% of people burn out over the next year, that's a direct threat to the people who are going to sell that product and deliver that. And if you have a culture of fear, which means the product team don't want to talk to the marketing team because they're worried about like conflict, then that's going to be a direct threat. So if you apply the sort of culture lens, yeah, we need a culture that makes it easy for those two teams to communicate, or that makes it easy for our salespeople to sustain their performance through flexible working, for example, when they've got aggressive targets, then that's going to lead to the results. So it's not necessarily its own KPI, but it is how the culture is applied to the teams that are delivering the main KPIs.
Sam, I would love to make a pause out here. What I feel like I would like to add is our case. We have talked with you about the language shapes culture case. That was the one, I believe, from your British Council experience. Let's make a small transition towards that. I will make a pause right now. Do you feel ready to talk about that?
Yes, yes. Yes. Can I just have a look back at the notes?
Sure, sure.
Um, yes, I remember talking about it. I'm just trying to make sure I get the details right.
It's
Um,
in almost in the end of the document.
yes, yeah, yes. Okay, yeah. Let me try. I think it was like Cambridge University that I was thinking about there, but
Yeah, that was something like that. So let's start with the question and we will proceed with the case.
okay.
Okay, Sam, as for you, what are some of the tools that HRs can use to shape the culture? Not maybe just HRs, but the organizations internally. I remember us talking about the language as a tool. Could you please tell our audience more about that?
Yeah. So I think the language we use, the way we talk to people or talk about people or communicate with people, I think that is a huge driver, it's a huge lever of company culture and how people feel about things. I think, yeah, the good communication is not telling people what you want them to know, but telling them what they need to know and understanding how they then feel about that message. And so making sure there are those feedback loops. I think, yeah, the example I have, so a few years ago, I was working for two companies at the same time. So two companies who were merging. And we sort of announced the merger, then we had a year-long process of leading into the merger. And this is like a small example, but when we were communicating it, it always started with company A and company B. So we talked about company A, then company B, and they're coming together. But all the communications put company A first and company B second. And when we went through and we looked at like the pulse surveying that we were doing on a monthly basis, we had the question in there, how do you feel? And people from company A felt pretty good. Like, yeah, everything fine, looking forward to it. People from company B, there's a lot of language related to fear, anxiety, the word takeover, like hostile came up a lot. And that was kind of creating a real anxiety. Like certain teams were really sort of like feeling that anxiety. And anxiety was leading to attrition and burnout and all those sorts of things. The great, like good insight, really simple fix. We started talking about company B, then company A. So celebrating company B and also talking about company A and making sure that it wasn't just A then B, it was B then A then B, and sort of switching around. And that's not the fix for everything, but you could see the references to takeover and fear and hostility come down because we're sort of communicating more on an equal footing and making sure each company is getting equal airtime, the leaders are equally as visible, and just sort of making those shifts. And I think like understanding the impact of the communications, even when it's like subtle, non-verbal communications, like that really starts to influence the culture. And the kind of lesson I took from that is just like, yeah, very, very, or being very careful about language choices and how we talk and keeping the authenticity and keeping the sort of you need your authenticity as a company, but you also need to be compassionate towards the needs of the people that you're talking to. So it's not overloading, but it's not underloading. And it's clear and assertive and all those sorts of things. And I think, again, that way that you manage change for communication or like that also is part of the result that you get.
I love that point about keeping the authenticity and keeping the compassion. Sam, thank you so much for our today's conversation. That was an inspiring one and that was the fulfilling one. I hope that many of our listeners will find the inspiration and practical steps on how to okay, culture doesn't exist, but how to say right, how to make culture happen or how to drive the right culture.
Yeah. Yeah. So culture doesn't exist on its own, but it's how to make the culture do what you want it to do, or make your culture drive the outcomes that you need. And it starts with the question, what does our culture do for us? I think, yeah, that's sort of, yeah, my main framing here.
Cool. Sam, thank you so much for being open and sharing your own history about that. Thanks to our listeners for spending your time with us. Drop your comments if you found some interesting points out there, or maybe you are up to discuss something. You're very welcome to share your thoughts. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Anna-Maria. Thanks for having me.
The Culture Engine.